We're joined today by professional MMA fighter Craig McIntosh, otherwise known by his peers as Mop, or Wee Mop. I don't know if...
Just Mop.
Mop, okay. You've taken
Mop's
over the realm.
The younger brother.
Yeah.
He's my younger brother.
He's your younger brother,
so
not the other way. Okay. I wasn't sure which way round it was.
I've got a younger brother, he fights as well. He's just started, he just recently fought in Cage Warriors actually.
Oh, wicked. So do you follow him along to his events?
Yeah, I was cornering him for that as well.
I was going to say, you're his biggest supporter, in the corner screaming. And...
that's your job as a big brother.
I think it's the onus is on you to kind of show that support and morale towards them.
Yeah.
But I put fighting out of Alloa.
Alloa.
Not
yep.
Alloa.
Alloa.
I had to get that right,
Aye,
Scotland. So I said that your humble journey began with grappling at Hull in Sauchi. There's a lot of tough words here for me.
Socky.
Socky. Yeah. See, I'm struggling with these words. Under the esteemed tutelage of late judo world champion Josh Gavin.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about kind of your journey to begin with, how your career started. Tell us a little bit about your come up into the career, kind of what inspired you in the first place to kind of take those first steps. Because I know you've got quite not illustrious, I'd say a colourful kind of background. You mentioned with am I correct?
Aye. So when I was younger, I started. I had got in a wee bit of trouble and stuff like that in my teenage years. To the point where I was like, right, I really need to sort my life out. I'm kind of brushing over it there, but it got pretty bad. I was able to make those changes. Fortunately, I was able to make those changes, and it was October 29th, 2007. I decided to stop drinking alcohol, and in turn everything that led from that.
Would you say there was a catalyst? Was there a key point that kind of inspired you to want to make that change?
Yeah, I think in AA and things like that, they would call it rock bottom. I never went through any of those programs or anything like that. It was all just through my own head.
So emotionally and mentally, you kind of were seeing the outcomes of your drinking, essentially.
Yeah, I'd kind of got to a point in my life where I had, I didn't like myself, and that's never a great place to be. Really anything about myself at that point, but I could remember a time where I did at least like myself. So I was
you wanted to get back to that point, and kind of, I suppose. Had you always trained up until this point?
No, so as far as being an athlete goes, I couldn't have been any further from being an athlete in my younger years.
Would you say you were athletic at all? Did you do running, football?
So
none of the sorts.
A terrible athlete as a child.
That's actually way more interesting, because mostly you think of athletes and you think they're from the moment they're born they're just naturally gifted, and they their parents kind of push them into this role.
I was the opposite. I was more kind of book smart.
Right.
So maths was my favourite subject. I loved maths, and jiu-jitsu is kind of similar to maths, to be honest.
Cool.
But it was really.
I'm terrible at math. How am I gonna? I was gonna ask for a demonstration later and everything.
It's logical, so there's always an answer pretty much. So that's the best way to.
It's a technical sport.
Yeah, very technical sport. Whereas MMA, it becomes there's so many variables that it becomes a wee bit harder to determine outcomes. But in
so would you say jiu-jitsu is a discipline? Is it kind of a little bit more chess-like in that it's kind of you chunk bits together and you learn how different sequences?
Aye, because it's only grappling. I don't know if I just see that because I was trying to solve MMA as a puzzle in my own head, but which is a very difficult puzzle to solve, I think.
So if I got you a Rubik's Cube right now, you'd just be there able to...
I've been too busy learning martial arts. Pretty much anything other than martial arts, I don't know that much.
I was gonna say just like me, and I was like, wait, no, I don't know martial arts. I left out that key ingredient too.
Aye. So when I was younger, I wasn't an athlete at all. I was just went through school, I tried pretty much every sport. I tried football, I tried rugby, I tried basketball, skateboarding.
I was going to say, what's the national sport in Scotland?
Football's really popular.
Football, really? Did you say rugby as well?
It's getting there now, but when I was younger...
Welsh, it was rugby is pretty much everything in Wales, at least.
Massive.
It wasn't really a big deal back then. I suppose it's become way more popular now. But for me, honestly, I just didn't like the directness of martial arts, a one-on-one competition. I didn't like the fact with team sports and stuff like that, you could fail and it wouldn't be your fault. So
you like accountability, being held responsible. I'm similar. I've always preferred independent sports. I like to kind of hold myself accountable And like if I feel like I'm not performing to like my best in what, even just, you know, casual going to the gym, going for runs, if I don't perform how I normally perform, it kind of like mentally gets to me. But I use that as a driving force to like steer myself forward, which is always good.
And it's easier to be able to kind of break it down and say, right, this is what I need to do. But when it's other people involved, then it's kind of almost like you're powerless with that.
Yeah, for sure.
And just even sometimes, you know, guys were coming in with slide tackles, and you've seen guys getting their knees ripped apart and all sorts.
All of that's kind of out of your control, I guess, isn't it? And like, I suppose when you're like an MMA fighter, like being able to have that kind of control is quite crucial, I'd imagine, because obviously it's you versus one person, so it's a game of...
And they're standing in front of you, there's nothing coming from the side, coming from the back, anything like that.
So you've got all the information, well, not all the information, but you've got information in front of you that you can
you can work with. So I never really got into team sports too much when I was younger. I enjoyed them, but I wasn't good at any of them, you know, and I probably
now be modest.
I was bad at all of them, you know. But now I know that's also probably just because I didn't stick with them long enough, because I do believe that if you practice hard enough at anything, you can get.
They say 10,000 hours is the number, isn't it? Or that's the ballpark figure that they give you for mastery, isn't it? So, out of interest, obviously you have knowledge of all these other sports growing up, but what was like your knowledge of martial arts back then? Did you have any kind of
nothing really? Like I loved the films, you know. I loved
Bruce Lee.
I loved the Bruce Lee films. I loved Rocky films. You know, anything, and I was a huge wrestling fan. You know, like the kid up the pretend
like
wrestling.
WWF.
I was a huge.
Do you have a favourite wrestler?
Yeah, Bret Hart, without a doubt. He was the guy that, you know, because he could wrestle for real a wee bit as well. And his dad had this dungeon where he used to take people, and people would come from all over the world to Canada to train with him and be taught how to wrestle, you know. It was like, and they had a particularly close to real style of wrestling as well, where, you know, some of the submissions.
So you were able to learn a lot just in the way that they moved and stuff, kind of technique.
I just like the whole idea behind it. Like, don't get me wrong, these guys don't get me wrong, you got some Olympic wrestlers and that eventually got into the kid-on stuff, the professional wrestling, but it was more just the storylines. I was just, as a kid, I enjoyed the storylines and stuff.
Dramatic, wasn't it?
It was really dramatic.
Do you have like a favourite, like of your own, or?
Wow.
Did you watch wrestling? I suppose you're a little bit younger, so maybe you missed out on that like big era of kind of wrestling.
I played the games.
Okay.
I really like Cactus Jack.
Oh, he was good.
He was cool. Like,
he was
I grew up with like the Big Show and Edge and.
Well, Cactus Jack, that was just Mankind, and also they were the same guy. Mick
It's an alter ego, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay, yeah. I must have missed that kind of like narrative then.
He had like three characters, and I think one time in the Royal Rumble he came out as all three characters, so he got eliminated, came back as an next character.
So he just kept coming back. See, I love those stories. And where they're like smashing people through glass. And
no, that's when I think back to that, like the stuff they were showing on the TV. No wonder it got banned a lot.
Wasn't it? Like the
people getting set on fire and
feuds
stuff, and blood everywhere. People getting set on fire, flung off roofs, hit with. You know, sometimes guys were getting hit with barbed wire baseball bats and stuff like that, and
you're thinking. I know it's obviously for show, and I know it's obviously they're trained actors, you might say, but at the same time, this is getting like publicly aired to millions of people.
Cutting themselves was common, you know. They would do the thing with the razor where they'd cut themselves and then the blood would be everywhere.
Crazy, isn't it? Like with like things with the Undertaker as well, where he'd be like in a burning building and stuff, like trying to escape. And you're like,
I think they were just really trying to push limits, you know. And they definitely did.
Understatement of the year. It was mad. I thought, because you'd see them being put through the announcers table and all this crazy stuff, and it was just like, it's a kid's thing, isn't it? And so you look at that and you think, oh yeah, my child watches this. That's very.
As a child, you love that.
I was a child watching it, you know. I loved it, and it was on late as well. I guess they had it on, you know, at 4 a.m. and stuff sometimes, but. I was staying up.
I find that though a lot of the time, like parents can like censor things like that. I know I had friends that, you know, they weren't allowed to play games like Grand Theft Auto growing up. Whereas like I was pretty much exposed to playing as many games I wanted, to watching what I wanted, and I've never felt. Obviously, I felt that that's kind of like helped me kind of understand things a little bit better.
I think that can happen as well. Like it'll go one way or the other. When you know you're exposed to a lot, it's going to. You're right. Now understand
absolutely.
But Yeah, so I enjoyed the wrestling. That was one of the things that I like to watch.
How
on
much
TV.
of an influence do you think that has had on kind of martial arts or MMA as a as you said, bunch of disciplines, obviously?
Yeah, I think it actually has had quite a lot.
Do you think?
Especially more so recently. You're starting to see guys. Obviously, Conor McGregor's been the the biggest name.
Over, aren't they?
Yeah. But even with that, Brock Lesnar would have been, I think, the first person who jumped from WWE to MMA, and he was crazy successful. He became a world champion in it. I mean, granted that the heavyweight division wasn't that strong at the time, but to do
kudos to him to switch over from, obviously, you'd say wrestling. Obviously, it's not easy physically.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not
physically
getting battered. Yeah.
Wrestling is still an act at the end of the day.
It's an act,
to make the switch is just mad.
But the difference with Brock Lesnar was, prior to becoming a professional wrestler, he was also collegiate wrestler, and he was national. He was a Division 1 champion with a ridiculous record. He's one of the greatest amateur wrestlers of all time. So as a heavyweight anyway.
Do you reckon a lot of the wrestlers, modern wrestlers, have a past experience of being elite athletes to some degree, or at least kind of college level?
A chunk of them anyway. A good chunk of them, because they are athletic guys, and they're usually genetic freaks, as well as probably some help from.
I was going to say it's probably. I'm sure Brock's had a little bit of help from.
The chemical
doesn't take away from obviously everything he's achieved.
Yeah, exactly. And even at school though, you can see. I've seen pictures of him from school and stuff. You can see he still is like a freak athlete as a child or whatever, and as a young man. So I loved watching that, and I would wrestle with my friends and my brothers and stuff like that. But that was about as much.
I was going to jump into it. I was going to say, obviously, what made you, or what inspired you to want to go down the route of fighting as opposed to any other sports that you potentially could have harnessed your energy towards?
So I knew that I enjoyed having two brothers. I knew I enjoyed
beating up your brothers.
Or getting beaten up sometimes.
My brother would disagree, actually.
But I enjoyed that sort of that. I always enjoyed the feeling of fighting. The actual act of it, but didn't enjoy the stuff that would come around with fights, because I was never the type to start a fight at school. I was never the type to...
Were you the one who'd kind of like the protector, somebody that you'd see the weakness in your friends, or you'd see their vulnerabilities, and then when somebody would abuse their power and take advantage of your friends, would you step in and...
but it wasn't like I had a significant advantage over anybody. That was in my nature, but it wasn't...
So it was just your DNA, kind of like a fire within you.
Yeah, because I wasn't, as a kid, I wasn't like a better fighter than anybody, because that's just, you're just a kid. It's not until you actually learn skills that you have a significant advantage over other people in hand-to-hand combat. So it just comes down to doing what you think's right as a kid, with stuff like that. So if somebody was getting picked on, you'd be sticking up for them, or just even sticking up for yourself is hard enough when you're a kid. Because you're constantly going to run into people trying to test you, when you're going through the school. It gets worse when you go to high school, because then there's more people, and it just that's just a process, I think, that unfortunately all young men go through, and girls as well. I'm sure they go through it, but in slightly different ways. Maybe not so much with violence, but tends to be more with words and stuff like that.
Mentally, which can sometimes affect you even worse than physically.
Yeah, I think girls have actually got it worse.
Generally, I agree. I think if you at least when you fight with your fists in school, that's accepted as a norm amongst guys.
Yeah.
Whereas, when girls fight, they get kind of, belittled for doing so, right?
That and top of, all other things that come along with it.
But fighting's essentially a form of expression, isn't it? It's a build-up of emotion that you kind of, especially as a child, like you say, because you're overwhelmed so many different angles, that what other outlet do you have other than to express yourself through fighting sometimes, which is sad, isn't it? That it has to lead
Something's
to that,
always went seriously wrong socially when fights occur outside of an environment. Being sober and being around people that are drunk a lot of the time, I see the warning signs. I see how they come about all the time. I find it hilarious. It's mostly to do with ego, and it happens when you get different guys that don't know each other in the room, and it must be in your sort of evolutionary psychology, where it's like tribalism. He's not from my tribe, and then but this person looks threatening and stuff like that, and all these internal things go off and cause you to act the way that you act. But I mean, I see it a mile off, and the biggest thing is the ego, is like dropping the ego, I think.
I was gonna say, from a Freudian perspective, he'd probably have a, something to say about kind of the ego, the superego, and like impulsive behavior, and like I'd imagine, like you say, not everybody has that within their DNA, but a lot of people feel threatened when in environments. So, like you say, their ego comes out. Yeah. They've got to assert like dominance or masculinity or whatever kind of traits.
I always find that really, really strange.
It's fascinating, isn't it? The psychology of why people feel threatened. When obviously back in like hunter-gatherer times, you'd have like fight, flight, or freeze, right? You had to hunt to survive.
Yeah.
Whereas nowadays, there's no pressure on somebody to actually fight, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Which is why, something like MMA is so fascinating, kind of. So one of the questions I've got, like, is MMA a good outlet for born warriors to fight legally? Do you think a lot of the time it's that people instinctively want to fight?
If I'm being completely honest, I'd probably get to there, but what I was saying, I love the act of fighting. I love the actual act of it, the feeling of it. It's one of the most enjoyable things in the world. It wouldn't be enjoyable if it was an easy fight. It wouldn't be enjoyable if it was somebody that I could just beat up and they were untrained. It's only enjoyable when it's an actual fight.
When it's an actual fight as opposed to just...
You don't know you're going to win, it's only enjoyable when you have to, push yourself to overcome and to try and get the victory. Yeah. That's when it's enjoyable. And the way I always looked at it is, although it can be classed as dangerous, in reality, I've seen way more injuries from football and rugby and people getting their ligaments tore apart from people just...
my cruciate ligament from getting rugby tackled from behind.
Yeah, just people maybe being a bit malicious in the moment, during a team sport, a contact sport. And also just life is really, really dangerous. So like I've met loads of people that were really good in the gym, had a lot of talent, could have been, done really well. They stopped training for whatever reason, it could have been anything. But then it could have even been something positive, like, I've got this job, I've got this job, I'm going to concentrate on that. But ultimately that job was not their passion, and they've then immersed themselves in that job, and at some point the job's got to the point where they've now got free time. I'm doing my job and I've got free time at night. So what do they then start to do with their free time? I'm too old for MMA now, I'm not going to go back to that. So then they start occupying their free time with other things that aren't good for them, and you start to see, and I've seen that happen with people where they've stopped the gym and then their lives fell apart, or even worse, they've maybe not been there anymore.
I suppose you see that a lot with athletes and like competitors in general as well, because once they come to like the end of their career, it's then like, if they haven't got a plan in place of what something they're passionate about other than like their sport, where do they go from there? And a lot of the times, like you say, people fall into addiction, gambling, kind of unhealthy habits of like spending money impulsively, and it must be tough.
It can be easily done, and I think those traits are quite similar to a lot of people that will be fighters or compete in martial arts, because it seems to be linked with impulsive people a lot of the time. It's quite a wild thing to do, but I think the biggest thing is not too many people hold their self-worth on who they are as a fighter and just as a fighter,
not as a person,
and not in the other things that they've got going on in their life. Like, sometimes don't even realise it could be amazing things like being a great parent, or anything, being a great family member, being a great partner to their to their missus.
Their perception in their own minds is that unless I succeed as a fighter, I'm not a worthy human being.
Yeah, and the actual reality of fighting is that very, 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 very few people are ever going to be the best fighter in the world. That's the reality of it in a sport that is.
And I suppose even when you are like,
you're only there for a short time.
Consistently as the best fighter in the world. Like,
there's only 2 people that can ever claim it. Probably, or maybe 3 or 4.
Have you got any kind of like inspirations or icons that you think currently in MMA that you would say are up there as being the best? Or?
Yeah, I've had a few over the years. I think like Khabib's the best example for young men and women that want to compete in martial arts, because he's the way
very humble man as well when you watch his interviews as well. Very down to earth, and
you can tell he doesn't do it for the money. The way that he lives his life as well. Obviously, he's Muslim, so
is his dad his coach?
He's
correct.
Yeah, his dad was his coach. His dad recently passed away, but his dad coached him.
I saw an interview with him recently. So is it fairly recently?
Recent, about a year or so ago. It was just COVID.
Oh God, that's bloody sad as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was.
Soul destroying. Yeah.
Yeah, he was. Amazing example of how to carry yourself and conduct yourself as well. He had the one incident where he lost his temper, but in terms of the way that he would carry himself in interviews, his presence was enough usually to win. And he could, he would have little cheeky digs, and he would play on the not being able to speak fully English.
When he probably could.
Yeah.
If he wanted to kind of gesture his feelings, he probably could elaborate on that. But the fact is that he kind of was confident in his own ability, so he didn't need to behave with words because he was good enough physically.
And I think that's a cultural thing as well. Like a lot of Russian people were like that in general. There was somebody before him who was known as being one of the greatest, a guy called Fyodor Emelianenko, and he was very similar demeanour. He looked like he just came out of the pub. He was kind of a sort of flabby guy,
just casual. Again, in his DNA to fight and just.
Yeah, but he was always stoic. He would come out and just looked like he was just going to the shops. He was away to the shop to get milk. That's what he looked like when he was coming out to fight. And then he would just, as soon as the fight, he would look down as well. Before the fight would start, and as soon as the fight would start, it would just be just pure violence.
How important is it to have controlled aggression when you're fighting, or to stay? I don't want to say calm because, like you said, it's a very aggressive sport, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's different for everybody. I think it's finding out what works best for yourself and also your opponent as well, because there's a fighter, just to use Cowboy Cerrone for example, there's certain fighters that are known as being slow starters, so so it would be in their opponent's favour to start aggressively and try and catch them as they start kind of slow, because with him, if he gets past the first round, he usually starts to warm up and gets comfortable, all the nerves are away, and he starts to become the martial artist that he actually is. Guys like that, I'd imagine, are probably excellent in the gym. He's still a world-class fighter anyway. He's reached the top level of UFC, had nearly more finishes than almost anybody. So I'm not saying he's a bad fighter in any way, but in terms of the top guys tend to beat him by coming out fast.
Yeah, I was going to say, so then you have to adapt your strategy and your fighting style. So would you say, obviously in your own career, have you had to change the way you fight? Which disciplines take prominence?
Yeah.
Within? So what do you specialise in mostly? Is it jiu-jitsu?
It's one of these things where I've put equal effort into all martial arts. The martial arts that I've studied the most would be, I would say, Brazilian jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai. Later on started judo as well. Put a good bit of time into judo, but I wouldn't.
You started with judo.
I started with a judo club.
Grappling.
Started with a judo club. So martial arts wise, I was really, really, really grateful to start at a judo club, because it's a martial art that's dismissed a lot in mixed martial arts. And now people are starting to sort of jump on board with it a wee bit more. But I've seen its worth at an early stage, and also just when you look at the actual history of the martial art, it's there's this crazy thing that happens where in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu I felt there was a wee bit snobbery where a lot of the guys tended to look down on judokas and their ability in the ground game, just due to the fact that it is less technical, but ultimately the martial art came from judo. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu came from judo. The guy.
Right. So taking someone to the ground kind of originated with judo then, as opposed to.
Yeah, it was part of the martial art judo. It's called niwaza, and randori is your stand-up throws. And what happened was a judoka came to Brazil and taught the Gracie family. And from there, the Gracie family changed the name of it to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And what they did do was focus specifically or mainly on the ground part.
On the ground,
and develop that part of the martial arts. So they fully deserve the credit for what they've done with the niwaza side of it. But it was not like they invented grappling on the ground. Before.
It was.
There was already
historically there were already evidence. Of that being in play.
They just further developed it and refined a lot of the techniques. But
I suppose that's still something ongoing. Like you're saying with judo, kind of. coming back into fruition.
Yeah,
obviously.
And even England as well, like there was catch wrestling, catch as catch can, that's sort of Wigan, I think it was. There's a place called the Snake Pit in Wigan, and they actually, a lot of those guys ended up training Japanese guys as well. So there's a bit of history there. There's
a lot of internationalisation as well.
There's catch wrestling over in Japan, where I think it was a guy called Billy Robinson trained a few judokas who then just solely represented the style of catch wrestling in Japan. There was a guy, Sakuraba. He was a great fighter, and he eventually had the name the Gracie Hunter. But he used to ask for all the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt guys, because everybody was scared of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts at the time. They were fighting in Japan in a show called Pride, and this guy Sakuraba, he was called the Gracie Hunter. He would fight them all, and he was beating all the Gracie family. But his style was catch.
This was the Gracie Hunter.
The Gracie Hunter, the Japanese guy Sakuraba, and he was beating all of the Gracie family. That's how he got the nickname. And he was a catch as catch can wrestler, so that was a style that originated in England.
I suppose it's more feasible nowadays, obviously, with being able to travel so readily, and obviously with seeing all these different things culturally on telly. And
I mean that's going back a while. That's going back to the very start. So you're into
I was going to say, back then it was for someone like him to come and do what he did was probably quite spectacular.
Aye, and the information was so valuable as well, because you didn't have the internet. So if some guy that had crazy skills came into your area,
you're like, we need to
and he's willing to teach you.
And that's how then it develops and then transfers to different villages,
changes culture,
cities,
and I mean Taekwondo, that's a Korean martial art originally. It's been pushed all over the world now as a martial art, and that's just a lot of the time with martial arts it's to do with being marketed the right way, and obviously effectiveness, but with time what tends to happen with martial arts is, unfortunately, they get watered down to make them accessible to everybody,
streamline them essentially. So it's kind of,
so you kind of lose a lot of the essence of the martial art, because it should never be easy, there's a big push now to especially for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I start to see it, and it's great. It's great that lots of people are doing it and stuff like that as well. But certainly when I started it, and it was very, very hard to do, and most humans that came through the door didn't stay. Because you had to be.
It was so
it was so tough that you wanted to quit. Like I wanted to quit for the first year most days. Every day. People talk about anxiety. You would always have anxiety about going to this gym, because especially when you're starting, there's nobody that's ever started martial arts that's went in and been a winner. You start losing. That's how it works. You're always going to be, because it's just like it's worse because it's a combat sport. But if you imagine you walked in, if you wanted to be a pool champion, right, and you walked into a pool hall and you started playing, you would be very surprised with yourself if you started beating all the guys that had been doing it for several years.
Absolutely. It's very technical. It's not to discredit something like sprinting or.
I think judo, like I say, was something I found it very. I'm very thankful we started with judo. I liked the way that they conducted themselves as athletes. I liked the way that they respected the mat. They respected each other. Everybody always spoke to each other with respect as well.
I remember saying you would get anxiety, obviously, going to your training at the start. And the tangent I think I was going to go off on was to say, not to discredit sprinters, but in sprinting it's kind of like either you have that speed or you don't, sort of thing. To a degree, there's a lot of technique there as well.
Yeah, because there's got to be that self-doubt and stuff as well. Like I know people going for the PBs, they'll be like, right, I'm going to do it today.
Absolutely.
And they're probably thinking about it all week,
But I'd imagine, generally speaking, if you're good at sprinting, then you're going to be able to compete with the field. If you're slow, you're never going to be even in that category. Whereas obviously with different disciplines in martial arts, you can probably tailor your own kind of fighting style, right? You can kind of develop that, I'd imagine.
And you would kind of think to yourself, am I going to come here and get my ass kicked tonight, or what's going to happen, because there is always that fire at the start. And training programs are much more organised now, but back when I started it, it was quite a while back. It's 2009, so when I started it, everybody's kind of just trying to trying to do what they thought was right. There was no solid, only a few big teams in the world really at that point, and everybody was just kind of doing what they thought was right or what they seen on the telly. There wasn't any proven training programs or anything.
Would you say there are some set in stone kind of structured training programs nowadays
far better
that work quite well?
I mean, the level of instruction in terms of what the information that's out there and stuff now is just incredible compared to when I started. It's unbelievable.
How much of it is in misinformation though? Like if you were to go on the internet, if the average person like me or Harry went on the internet, are we going to go down a rabbit hole of just misinformation? And
so I think the source is the best. If you were to go to a good source, and there's so many amazing sources out there. I started using something called BJJ Fanatics recently, and I was quite late to the party with it because I had always just been just time on the mats, and you can definitely you can learn a lot for being in the mats. Some people go too far where they just watch technique all day and then don't spend enough time actually practicing it. But at the stage I'm at, I'm really enjoying learning from these online sources and stuff because you can literally purchase something online and you can learn from some of the best coaches in every discipline in the world, and these guys have put a lot of time and invested a lot of time into putting these videos out there, and usually they're showing their signature techniques, in-depth videos where it can maybe last 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours of the smallest of details on these techniques. So you're starting to see guys now winning with a coach, winning from a coach that they've never met, because they've been practicing.
Purely because they've been practicing that stuff.
Tutorials at a high level as well.
If you were starting to get into mixed martial arts at this point in time, where do you think you'd start? Would you go to a gym or would you go towards the internet?
Absolutely a gym. At the start, you need to be going to a gym. The information you would just miss so much. It would be like an old granny purchasing an iPhone, 12 or whatever. It would be like them buying the highest.
My nan's up to date. Have you not seen fair play. I am.
Imagine somebody that just can only knows how to make a phone call and that's it. But they're buying the best of gear, that's got all these other capabilities. That's what it would be like. They would be missing everything, So. That's kind of what you'd be. That's the best equivalent I could make really there. If you were to not know anything about martial arts and you were to watch one of these videos, you would miss all the details, you would miss the finer points, and you wouldn't even understand most of the terminologies that they're using, because there's some basic terminologies that they'll talk about, the way that they describe positions or grips and stuff like that until you've done a few years of jiu-jitsu or a few years of martial arts,
have no knowledge of whatsoever.
You would just think, what is this guy talking about? Why is he so obsessed with something like whether you grab the end of somebody's foot or
those
this
small,
part of their
those
foot.
minute details
Tiny
have huge amount of impact when you're actually, and that's the kind of, when you separate the viewer from the person that actually practice that day in day out. When you see these, how do you react when you see fans when they watch TV and they're like, oh, this person's past it, or they're terrible, or when you know the ins and outs of the sports and the techniques?
I find it horrible because it's and unfortunately it's came with the sport becoming more popular, and also with Conor McGregor, he brought so many eyes to the sport, and overall it's been positive because the more eyes to the sport the better.
Yeah, of course.
But it also means that if you jump on Facebook during a fight night, that you hear all these people talking about guys, and it happened in boxing for years as well when it happens. But
they just have no respect for them as athletes and competitors at that point.
What I always try and say to people is I tried my absolute best at martial arts my whole life, committed my whole life to it, just to get to the level that I got to, which is still not UFC level, which is still not the best fighters in the world. These guys that are fighting for that are absolutely incredible, and there's no loser. The guys fighting at that level, they're unbelievable competitors.
But even for yourself, like you said, not to make it to the UFC, that's no discredit to you, because like you said, you've trained your hardest, you've pushed your limits as best as you can go. So from a mental strength perspective and resilience, you've been at a place where you've committed yourself, and at the end of the day you can't do more than that.
That's exactly it, and you've just got to know, as long as you have maximised your potential, you can always be happy with yourself.
For anything more, absolutely.
compared to where my goals were when I first started, like I didn't even know if I wanted to ever have a fight. You know, when I started, I was thinking to myself, you know, just getting fit and learning to defend myself was my goal. You know, and that was great. If I could have got there, I would have been happy. And all the things that I've achieved, I felt like I was free rolling with it, because it was just all, well, I never expected to be able to do this. Well, I never expected to be able to do this. And
do you ever feel like you want to go from like one high to the next? So say like when you've like won a fight, do you then like think, oh, I want to challenge this person, or I know I'm good enough to fight this person?
I mean, that's all it is, like, for me, just testing yourself to see
stepping stones.
What am I capable of, you know, and that's all you're ever asking yourself. It's never out of like, oh yeah, I want to beat him, or jealousy. It's the only emotion that ever drives me is, you know, what am I capable of? What more have I got to offer?
What more can I do?
And what, you know, I just want to be the best that I can be.
And I suppose, you know, like, especially with most sports, your career, it's not long, is it? Within that time, you want to just keep pushing yourself and just.
That's how I feel totally. Especially like more recently, you know, I realise that especially in this sport, your body gets banged up quite a lot, and it's like you just want to make them. For me, I want to make the most of these last few years that I've got of competing with a healthy body, or healthy-ish body. You know, it's just you're trying to do everything that you can, and I kind of spoke to you guys about this earlier, but ultimately, once you've done that, when you've loved the experience so much, that it would be wrong not to pass it on, I think.
To pass that on, yeah, absolutely. Kind of talking about, obviously, you're saying like with your body getting banged up, and like you're saying as you get older, it gets harder to like recover. What's it like, kind of in terms of recovery after like an intense fight? How do you bounce back when you've just been basically put through hell bells?
Everyone's different, and I was quite fortunate throughout my career, you know, that I never really took a lot of damage throughout my career. I had a few times where, you know, I'd had injuries or whatever, but nothing ever too severe.
Nothing major where it's kept you out.
Yeah, I took a fight recently, and in that fight, you know, I had some serious pain in my leg. I got kicked, calf kicks a lot of the times, and the guy was really powerful. So after it, you know, I could definitely feel them. But you know, during the fight, I've always say to everybody, you don't really feel
adrenaline.
You don't really feel anything, and like your mind.
Because it always looks nasty, doesn't it? Like, and I'm sure it is very nasty.
It is definitely.
But at the same time, like. You're just so focused on what you're doing that you just ignore the pain.
Exactly. We had a boxer, we have a boxer, pardon me, that goes into schools for us, and he was competing, in Las Vegas, and he had his ear ripped off from down to around here, and it was hanging, it was bleeding all down his face, and he had absolutely no idea until the end of the fight when he touched it. And he realised, he looked up at the screen, and there he was, with his ear hanging off like that. He had no idea whatsoever.
I mean, you can't really do this kind of sport without having a strange tolerance to pain, and it develops over time. You know,
I was gonna say, do you like naturally have that pain tolerance, or does it take for you to get kicked and hit quite a fair few times?
It develops, definitely it develops, because like the sport of Muay Thai is often about that, like your body, conditioning your body to be able to take damage and give it out. That's a lot of what is involved in Muay Thai. You know, a lot of their training methods are to do that, to condition their bodies, to condition their shins.
You to be able to like develop that threshold of pain tolerance.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of their scoring criteria and stuff as well is based on, you know, body displacement and how they react to strikes. So, you know, you could hit me with an equal strike, and if I move and it looks like, well, that looks like it's really kind of affected that person, that's going to score really highly. But if I can stand and, you know, keep a straight face and, you know, just nothing, show nothing, then it's going to score less.
It's about not showing too much emotion either, because that as soon as you give away that you've been hit in a weak spot,
as well,
that is when they're going to capitalise and use that to their advantage.
You can't show in. It's like poker when you finish him. And it will happen, because I've made that mistake once in a fight. You know, I actually made that mistake once, and the person recognised it. They'll see it in your eyes very quickly, and it's.
How do you react to that though? In that moment when you know you've messed up and you've given away like an important part of body language,
it's just like,
what can you do?
I just blame myself. Like, it's, you know, I'm quite hard on myself with these things, but I've done that.
It's good. You learn from those experiences though. If you hadn't have shown that like little bit of pain, you may have gone into another fight and it could end far worse than.
Exactly.
So
and
it's good to learn. Absolutely.
It is. You've just got to, you know, right, okay, you know you done wrong there. let's never do that again.
Good. But my next question for you, so it ties in with literally what we were just talking about. What would you say is kind of the worst pain, or what's the one? What would you say is your weakness in terms of your pain threshold? Is there one kind of kick or one strike, grapple that like you just feel every time? Like, is there a part of your body that just hurts more?
No, not really. To be honest, I mean,
are you the Terminator?
I just get so used to pain. To be honest, that's. I mean, you really do. You get used to being in pain, and it's. I don't take ibuprofen or anything like that, because like I feel like when you're in pain, your body's trying to tell you something, and it's better to recognise it and feel it.
Trying to deal with it as opposed to just suppressing that immune system.
And you learn about natural ways to be able to kind of ease that pain as well. You can look at like yoga, for example, something I've only just recently got into, but it's absolutely phenomenal.
I started myself, dabbled with it like a few bits. I love it. Yeah, it's brilliant. It's one of those things that you kind of scorn or not mock, but you're just like, it's not going to help me. And then you try it, and it just relaxes you. It kind of eases tension and everything. It's fantastic.
What it does for your body is amazing, but you've got to drop the ego. And the guy spoke to me about that before it, because it's easy to go in and be like, yeah, I'm a big strong guy or whatever, and think you're going to be good at yoga, but like you have to leave your ego at the door. Just like martial arts, you have to leave your ego at the door, because when you go into a yoga class and you've got like an old lady on your left and an old guy on your right, and they're doing the techniques way better than you, it's hard to still have an ego at that point, because
I found it funny, kind of like growing up, because obviously being Welsh, like Ryan Giggs was always one of like my idols.
Yeah, he's class.
And like I just found it fascinating that throughout his career he always used to like mention that he would do yoga, and like growing up everyone would just tease him and say, oh, yoga, come on. Yet his career was really like, he was still going close to like 40, wasn't he? So still had a similar amount of pace, athleticism, so there must be something to it that kind of...
I mean, I believe we're meant to do it. Like, I believe as humans we should be doing it.
More stretching, more kind of breathing techniques. Have you heard of a guy called Wim Hof?
Yeah.
The Iceman. Have you heard of this guy?
No.
YouTube him. It's like you'll be mesmerised by what he does.
There's a lot of the cold water immersion and stuff.
So you'll like immerse himself in cold water for like 10 minutes at a time in like ice buckets, everything. He wakes up at like 6 a.m, jumps straight into like a lake, like freezing cold lake. But mentally and spiritually, it's meant to be really good for your kind of psyche.
They're all ancient methods, they're all things that
I've interested. Do you take cold showers ever?
I'll be perfectly honest. That's the one thing I can't force myself to do. I hate the cold. There's my weakness. There's my weakness.
I found it. He's not a Terminator.
I hate it. I hate the cold, honestly.
Turn the temperature. Let's get turning this into an interrogation. You thought this was an interview. That's awesome.
I cannot deal with it. Like, I've done the ice baths like once or twice, and I've done the cold water immersion. I just do not enjoy it. Like, you could put me in any kind of heat, I'm fine,
I'm the opposite. I go outdoors like in the winter and I'm just wearing a t-shirt. I get all like young people like,
what's going on now?
Jumper, young man. I'm like, I'm boiling. I think because like my extremities, like my hands and my feet get extremely cold, and then like my core temperature is just always warm, like, which is kind of good.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, don't have to invest in jumpers. Save a lot of money. So we touched on that. I've still got a bunch of questions, but it's been good. Like, it's been like really free reign, which I like.
I'll finish off that question about the martial arts, because I felt like I kind of just went round in circles with it. So like judo, done a good bit of boxing as well. I would say that, but yeah, the martial art I've been most successful is probably Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That's the one that I've decided to, or submission grappling I would call it, which is, you've got 3 grappling arts which are mainly useful, which would be your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, judo and wrestling, sort of collegiate style and the different forms of wrestling. If you merge all 3, that would be what would be classed as submission grappling.
And that, so you combine those like 3 grapple disciplines to...
Because a lot of judo and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they traditionally would... Sambo as well is a good grappling art, but I've never really trained in that much. But yeah, those are your sort of main grappling arts. Most of them require like the kimono, so traditionally they would all have you wearing the kimono, or the gi it's called. I compete in that just really to earn my belts and to showcase, that I also know that martial art. But my favourite out of them all is competing, shorts and t-shirt on, just grappling in a combination of all with as minimal rules as possible. That's probably what I've been most successful in as an individual martial art, because over the last sort of 4 years, that's what I've decided to put my sort of channel my energy into, and I've been competing in more. So
do you prefer, like, obviously you correct me because my knowledge of MMA isn't the best, but do you prefer to like stay standing, or do you prefer to like grapple and then take somebody down to the ground?
Yeah, the ground is good.
The ground you're more comfortable with.
I feel like on the ground, once you're there, I'm going to have a significant advantage over most people.
Right. So I was going to say, do you generally have to be good at both, kind of like standing up?
I actually sometimes enjoy the standing up part more. I don't know if it's probably it's more competitive, and I like the feeling of it. But I would be, I've had 21 MMA fights in total, between amateur and professional, and 13 of them I've finished. 10 of those were by submission, the other 3. So I'm a numbers guy, and if you look at numbers, the numbers would say
statistics
that. Yeah, exactly. I'm better at grappling than what I am at any the other martial arts.
Well, you do have a North American Grappling Association champion belt, right?
Yeah, that's
true. See, that's why I wear the glasses.
Because I think I picked up like 2 belts in MMA in the amateur leagues, and then when I went into grappling, I've just picked up sort of belt after belt really every time I'm competing. Despite it not being my primary focus, I've been pretty successful at grappling, without trying that hard, to be honest.
Do you do like specific gym training to like develop that strength? Do you do like? Because I've got a friend that does bouldering, like climbing.
Yeah.
And he's got very strong forearms, and like I wonder whether that helps with like grappling or certain things in the gym.
Actually, I'll give you a shout out Scramble, because Scramble just brought out a cool grip trainer. It's like a fat grip, so it's called. So you can't link your hand.
Mention this to my friend. He'll be keen.
They're pretty cool. Once you can connect your hand, the grip's stronger. But if you're like that, then that's solely grip. If you're holding on to something that...
Is it one of the ones that you like clench closed?
Well, no, you can't even get to close, because it's like two sort of wooden blocks almost that you're going to just hold round, but you can't connect your hands. So if you can imagine trying to hang from that or do pull-ups to that, it's going to strengthen your grip.
It's going to like develop those muscles.
It specifically works well for no gi training, because in the gi, you're gripping like you'd be gripping cloth, and you can get some different trainers for that as well to improve your grip, but like thick bars would be one for that, pull-ups as well if you're holding on, but these are specifically for grabbing wrists and stuff.
I've always notoriously had like very weak wrists, so like whenever I do like certain things in the gym, or I do like go climbing with my friends and stuff, kind of I've got the natural like strength to like hold myself, do pull-ups and all those sorts, but I always find that my wrists start to like fail me first.
And I actually found that a lot at first, like my first few years I had a lot of trouble with my wrists, and then one day they just stopped. But one day they were fine after that,
because you'd strengthened it
for a while.
So much practice.
But it was a lot of pain. Like I remember the first few years, like these are never going to get strong, and even with punching and stuff, I'd always think to myself, this is tough.
In terms of like striking and stuff, kind of how did you like have to do some like boxing to develop that?
Yeah. So I mean, I trained boxing. I used to go and spar with amateur and professional boxers. I had a lot of
training.
Yeah.
Like in terms of you must like have a catalogue of different things you've learned over the years.
Yeah, I was really fortunate. Like I had a guy that was a boxing coach who spent a lot of time with me, invested a lot of time with me, and he was really. He was doing MMA at the time, so he was a guy with a boxing background who had also coached boxing. A guy called Jim Miller, really great guy, still good friends with him to this day. And when I first joined the MMA gym, I'll be honest, I probably would have quit. I wouldn't have even continued in martial arts if I hadn't met him quite early on. So when I first joined the MMA gym that I started at, which was also a judo club, he was training for his first fight, and he was just that's a great thing about these types of gyms. You'll always get somebody that kind of will try and take you under their wing and help you, and everybody.
Can I ask a quick question? Yeah. So one of the questions I had here anyway was, what's like the greatest message you've ever had from a coach? What's something that somebody is like, if you can remember any, of course, that somebody has said that has like really resonated with you?
I think it's just believing in yourself. Like that's the biggest thing. It's
like
everything comes from believing in yourself. Yeah, like that's why I brought this kind of. This one along here. It's a trophy I won, and it also
it's just a constant reminder of what you can achieve.
It was that was the first ever trophy I won, which was the first. It was for a championship, and you know I was not favourite going into it to win it, and I doubted myself before it. I was a few fights in my martial arts career at that point, and my coach kind of phoned me and asked me if I wanted to take that one on. And I can remember saying, right, I was at my work at the time, I thought, right, I'll have a think about it and phone you back. And as soon as I hung up the phone, I was like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doubting yourself there? Like, he's called you an opportunity, he believes. Because I asked him, I said, well, what do you think? And he said, look, it's going to be really, really tough. The guys that are going to be in it are going to be more experienced than you. You'll need to be, you know, in the best shape you can. He says, but it's 5 months away, and if you train really hard, you should be able to win it. And I was like, right, okay, let me have a think about it. And I got really annoyed with myself for saying, right, I'm going to have a think about it.
Yeah.
And that was the last time I can ever remember doubting myself, you know, everything since then, because I just got so annoyed at myself, like, well, what are you doing all this training for?
Do you prefer a coach to be, like, honest with you, or would you rather them kind of...
Honesty is so important, and I'm the same with my students, you know, you've got to be so honest, and you must be honest with people when it comes to fighting, because it's their health. It's their health at risk, guy. You cannot.
You're putting people's lives on the line.
And that goes both ways. It can be being honest with somebody if you feel that, because sometimes all it takes for somebody to achieve something is hearing that they can achieve it. You know, so if you speak to somebody and you say, look, you're capable of doing this. You know, you just
even though it's going to be
tough.
It's going to be adversity, but you can.
Yeah, you need to give it everything, but you know you're capable of doing this. And the opposite's true as well. That you know. If somebody's not training hard enough, or I always say to people that their training needs to match their goals. You know, the way that they train needs to match what their ambitions are. If they're not training appropriately to their ambitions, then they're never going to achieve them. You know, and that's one of the biggest things, is being honest with somebody. If you see that, right, you're kind of ticking over, at the start you should be getting better like that, you know, because it's all skill acquisition. But if you're getting, and you see it even with guys in the UFC as well, like you see some guys come in and when they've got the hype about them, they're just like, whoa, that guy's a different fighter from his last fighter, and you could see it with Conor McGregor, all the great guys. John Jones was the same, all the guys that are absolutely amazing.
What was it? Am I correct with, is it Adesanya?
Adesanya was the same, you know.
See someone like him and he's just blowing up.
Sometimes in a different universe, you're like, what is going on? That guy's just... because even some of these guys are like 10, 15 years into their career, yet they're still making these exponential leaps.
Not that they plateau, but like you say, skill acquisition is quite fast to begin with, but then you hit like a peak where you kind of you grow not quite as exponentially. But also, I suppose you've got the other athletes who are adapting to the way these people fight and kind of like develop their own strategies to combat that themselves.
So the playing field's it's a tough level, but you still sometimes see guys that can just rise above everybody and look like totally out of this world, and you think to yourself, right, that's what you want to be trying to aim for. You know, you want to be looking like a different fighter, because also
I'm sure you've had those moments in your own career where you thought, holy, I'm just taking off.
I've got really, really good in this last period of time, or you know, and you see it with other people a lot of the time as well, where you're like, wow, since the last time they've competed, they look like a completely different fighter.
Do you ever like draw comparisons with other people? Did you ever get to a stage where you're like, I was growing so quickly, and now this person has suddenly grown really quickly, and I've not changed since the last time I trained? Or...
Yeah, I mean, I was really fortunate. You see it now more like as an older guy. I'm getting, you know, I'm 34 tomorrow, so you know, I'm starting to see there's kids in the gym now.
Happy belated birthday. That's the opposite.
Preemptive birthday.
There we go.
But I see it now with guys that maybe have been in the gym since they were 15, 16, and you're starting to see sometimes now 18, 19-year-olds 20-year-old guys who can beat up fully grown trained men. You know, some of these guys are unbelievable. So when you see that guys in their very early 20s that are world class fighters, and they're hanging or doing well with guys that have been, you know, top level.
Do you think that's a lot to do with there being more information about the sport and like more people are seeing the sport, so there's a bigger, wider pool of talent being drawn towards it?
Yeah.
Because you notice like bigger nations, like generally it should be the case.
Yeah.
Like England should be doing much better than Wales. They should be in theory though, because the population, right? And do you see that more with like MMA since it's grown?
Yeah.
In that there's a bigger pool of people.
Definitely. You know, in general, you can always say certain things about people from certain countries. Usually there's going to be comparisons. There's obviously people that are outliers and are different, but in general, Americans tend to...
Who's like your Scottish idol?
Oh.
Have you got like sports person that's Scottish?
I mean, I'm really lucky. Like, see, a lot of my teammates, my previous teammates, were huge inspirations for me. I trained with two guys that got to the UFC. Was, you know,
so it was the training.
Yeah, exactly.
So you know you had that first-hand experience of getting that training as well, to a degree.
Because people have this conception or misconception where they think that you know, that people are just born fighters, and definitely
nature versus nurture.
There can be an element of that, but almost always it comes down to hard work. You know, how much hard work are you going to put in? How much time have you put in? How many hours have you put in? And I got to see that really early on with you know, watching Robert, the way that he trained in comparison to the other guys in the gym. You know, he just trained with a different sort of ferocity, and you could tell that he had intentions and what his goals were. So, you know, when you could see that, it was like, right, okay, this is what a guy that, you know, wants to be good at this sport is doing. And then, you know, even further on in my career, I moved to an amazing gym called Higher Level MMA. I was able to, while I was actually at that gym, you know, two of my teammates achieved, you know, the UFC. A guy called Stevie Ray, who's probably the best fighter I've ever, you know, been around or trained with. Just,
you do a lot of like, I know in boxing they call it sparring.
Yeah.
Similar terminology in MMA.
Yeah, like we all, you know, used
so
to.
Would you fight with them?
Yeah, we used to all train together, and
you learn a lot through that.
It's amazing. Like the learning experience for training with these, you know, different high level guys is absolutely amazing. You learn so much, and you know, they're being nice to you most of the time as well. You know, they're being nice to you because you're teammates. So, and yeah, one of my other teammates, Danny Henry, managed to make it to the UFC. You know, fought in had some amazing performances in the UFC as well. So, you know, seeing all these things happen, and it's just, yeah, really satisfying to see people achieve their dreams. Because it was so difficult when I first started. It was like less than a handful of fighters in the UFC when I started, and now the you know, the promotion has expanded. So it was almost like an unachievable dream when I started. I didn't think it was something that would ever even be possible.
So at that time, did you have like, what kind of goals and aspirations did you have? Obviously not knowing if this was ever going to become this huge sport that it now is.
Aye, for me, honestly, like I was just totally free rolling. I already felt blessed just to be part of the sport. So, you know, I didn't ever.
In terms of like the, you know, the mental health traits, and you know, things to do with like your psyche that you built from that, was it just more about like the discipline and stuff for you in general? Or?
I loved everything about it. But the first day I done it, like the first day I stepped on the mat, I remember phoning my dad after it. I was being sick out in the grass, like lying in the sun, and I can remember speaking to him, just saying like, that was so hard, but it was amazing, like just absolutely brilliant. Everything. I had all these crazy perceptions of who I was as a person and stuff like that, and they all just got shattered on the first day. And like,
what did your dad think of it?
I think he was just glad that I was trying to do something positive, you know. And in martial arts, generally, people can see it's a positive thing. So yeah, he was always quite encouraging with it as well. But yeah, for the first day I done it, just everything about it, you know, it helped me so much in my life. Where learning, you know. As I said before, I wasn't really much an athlete at school, but I had to learn about becoming an athlete because of martial arts.
Such a big takeaway, I think, for a lot of like youngsters to hear that like you might not necessarily have been someone that was particularly athletic, but just because you, in your own mind, you don't think you are, doesn't mean you can't achieve things within the realm of athletics.
Because a lot of it is learning. You know, a lot of it is right. Okay, well, you know, I'm a 21, 22-year-old man now. I'm probably not going to grow anymore unless I do something about my body or actually make an effort to do that. So at first I just kind of spent my time learning about skill, and then you had to learn about nutrition, you had to learn about strength and conditioning, you had to learn about cardio, you had to learn about everything. And I was
what kind of things do you have in your fridge?
That's a big
such a random question.
Yeah, well, I'm
me.
Really fortunate. A wee shout out. I'm sponsored by a company called the Chef's Meal Prep Company. They're they're pretty good. So they give us
not so
they've been brilliant. So that was fairly recently I started working with them. But prior to that, I would always make my own meals and stuff like that. And
would you eat? Because from what, like, a lot of the athletes that I've spoken to, they generally have like a consistent kind of not set meal precisely the same. They'll have the same kind of meal at a certain time, and like porridge in the morning.
Every day, that's what I do. So I've porridge with blueberries and honey every morning. That's I'll start the day with that and a cup of tea.
Okay, I'm a little bit unhealthy. I have like dark chocolate.
Nice.
Put some raisins in, a little bit of cinnamon.
It's good.
It's good. It's really good.
I used to be
Scottish oats as well.
Aye. I would say I used to be quite bland with what I would put. Like, I was just playing it safe. I'd beaten like tuna out of a tin, 5 cherry tomatoes, 20 brown bits of pasta.
Tuna sandwiches.
I didn't really have much of a clue with nutrition. I was just trying to keep it super strict, and I managed to get myself to I could get myself to 10.4 stone for a same day weigh-in, which is
what's like your maintenance weight?
it has changed over the years, not massively, but I walk roughly about 75 kilos if I'm fit.
I think I'm around. Is that around 11 to 11.5 stone?
Yeah, close to 11 and a half. I'd say, roughly. So I walk about that when I'm fit. I compete. In grappling, I can compete anything up to 80 kilos. I don't worry too. That's another thing as well with grappling. I don't really worry too much about weight. I'm at a decent enough level where I can. It doesn't matter the size of the person really. With MMA, you need to be really to the decimal point on
I was gonna say, in terms of kind of like grappling or different forms, like, does height play a factor into any of those? Will someone who's taller be better at one discipline compared to another?
Not better, but every body type has its own sort of pros and cons. So
interesting. So if you're like an endomorph, then you might be better at this.
And I can look at somebody's body and usually have an idea of what I would be trying to do to them.
Oh, so you're going to say what you teach? In that case, I won't ask you.
But also, you would teach something slightly different if somebody had different types of limbs, and you can do. There's ways to do the technique, different ways to do the technique. If you're a heavier person, if you're a lighter person, if you've got longer arms, if you've got shorter arms.
I read a thing called the triangle. What is the triangle? Is that something you can show?
Yeah, for sure.
Would you be able to do a choke on?
If you want, I could coach you both to do it to each other if you want.
Could you?
Yeah, let's get.
Could I do it to Harry?
Let's do it.
How annoying
You can get him on back if you want.
How's the camera going to get there? Is that phone showing this? Because I want to hurt him. That was wicked. So not what I was expecting at all. So technical, isn't it?
And like with that particular move, there's loads of wee details that make that a lot tighter.
Sorry, that needs to be rearranged, isn't it? This fine, your camera's cooler,
There's loads of small details that make that a little bit tighter. If you get the angle, it gets a little bit tighter. There's some stuff you can do with your knees that makes it a bit tighter. So it's all stage by stage, and there's also different attacks that if the guy manages to defend that, then this other attack opens up. And
how tight would you go with that kind of, like, you don't stop?
Yeah, like your aim is to put the person to sleep. It's
brutal. It is. When you get the physical chance to do something like that, you can see how much impact that could cause. Like, if I went the whole way and squeezed and tightened, I'd be dead. And I can imagine, like, even in just the state you were in, it's uncomfortable, right?
It's very uncomfortable. It's extremely.
The aim with that is that you should have the ability to put the person to sleep. So you want to get good enough at that technique that you could put them to sleep. That would be your aim with that move. And after doing that, say 10,000 times, you would maybe be a master of that move. Because not only would you learn the mechanics of the finish of that move, you can also land that move for different positions. You can land that from the top. You can land that from different positions, side control from the bottom. You can fly into it from standing. I've got a match somewhere where I grab an overhook on the guy, and it's in a cage, and I just jump up and put that move on. You know, you can catch that in all different positions, and ultimately you're trying to. You've got to have the ability to put the person to sleep, but the plan is that they tap out before they go to sleep, you know.
Because you don't want to actually.
Yeah,
that was one of my questions. Is like, where did I find it? How do you feel about like the injuries you've inflicted upon your opponent after a victory?
It's never the aim to inflict injuries on somebody. And, that's what I like about jiu-jitsu is that
it's controlled.
If everybody plays the game right, nobody gets hurt. You know, if the person understands jiu-jitsu well enough that they tap out before, like say I catch a guy in an armbar, okay, I'm pretty good at armbars. The guy's going to try and get out of the armbar, but once he realises he's not getting out of it and his arm's about to break, hopefully he taps out before his arm breaks. If he doesn't tap out, then his arm breaks.
His arm's going to break.
It's as clean as that.
Is that where a lot of the freak accidents happen, is in that split second where the person maybe hasn't tapped because they think they can keep going? Is that where like ego and pride takes over and the person...
Why it's so important to get rid of the ego, because some people even do that in the gym. You know, where their ego kicks in the gym, and
they'll break their arm in the gym.
Most people aren't going to break somebody's arm in the gym, but at the same time, nobody should ever put you in that position as well, because especially with things like leg locks, the margin's really small. You know, so somebody can be thinking they're getting tapped out, or they're thinking that they're maybe close to getting out the move even. And you know, they're actually, it only takes one sudden movement and the whole knee rips apart.
Don't go.
So do you put trust in your opponent in that sense? Or?
Nah, unfortunately there isn't. You've got to assume that they're not going to tap, really. You've got to assume the worst, and your job is only to keep applying pressure or doing what you've got to do until that person is either unconscious or the referee pulls you off them, or you know, that person taps out. And it's a brutal sport, and to ever hide for the reality, that would be, you'd be setting yourself up for a fall. You know?
It is brutal, but anyone can get into it. Which is interesting, because I see so many female fighters now that, like Amanda Nunes, like plain and simple,
amazing.
You could beat up most of the guys in UFC anyway. Like,
very good. And that is the thing, and everybody gets treated equally as well. You know, so it's one of those situations where it's very tough. You know, sometimes the women can be quite bad for, you know, not tapping, because they almost fight. They weren't showcased in the UFC until a few years ago. It was Ronda Rousey that kicked in the door for that. She got, you know, women competing in the UFC, and since then it's, you know, they've added more weight divisions, and it's, you know, they've shown that
they're making it mainstream, and it's obviously on the main channels phenomenal nowadays.
They're just as good as the men, if not better. And
that's the thing. It's
and it's amazing to watch that, because some of these women are absolutely beautiful women, and you're thinking that you would to see their demeanour outside of it. You see them on interviews and things like that. There's a girl, Rose, I think it's Namajunas, when you speak to her, or you see her speaking, and you're like, wow, she just seems like this gentle, and she's just a gentle, kind person, but she fights unbelievably. She's just really skilled at martial arts, and that's where people start to see the difference, because, you know, it's easy when guys, it just looks like, you know, guys just scrapping when you've got people shouting at each other and being all aggressive at the weigh-ins. There's no discipline. They can't shake each other's hands.
But that's mostly to do with salesmanship, isn't it? That's like, unfortunately, like, it'd be nice if everyone could just go quiet and just go into a fight. But I feel like a lot of the time that's what people want to see when they watch the TV. Because especially people that don't understand these sports, that they're actually about respect. Like, hugely about respect. But they see these people just like disrespecting each other. And then they wonder at the end of the fight, they're like, why are they hugging? And because they don't realise it's a journey that they've had to train for months to get into that.
Most intimate things you can ever do with somebody. Like, you almost know exactly who somebody is after the fight.
It's like a dance, really, isn't it? Like, right then, that was very, like, in a way way choreographed.
Yeah.
Kind of like, obviously for yourself, it's just a natural, like, it's like riding a bike, isn't it? But like for myself, then it was kind of like put your leg there, do that, move your arm round, and it's very choreographed.
Yeah, like you should be able to look and see every detail, to a person.
Yeah, you could break it down and like fully analyze like what you're doing right. And
yeah, absolutely. Like, and that's the
intricacy of the sport.
It's really satisfying as well, because you can maybe just give somebody one detail, and that changes the way they see that whole move, and they'll start to have success with that move. And they're like, right, now I see why now I know why I wasn't getting it. Now I can get it.
How often would you train to like develop these skills? Like how many hours? How many times a week?
I mean, I always had a job, but I trained 3 hours most nights, every night for over 10 years.
3 hours most nights.
Dedication.
You're training different martial arts, and when I was training different martial arts, there wasn't a one-stop shop. Especially my first 5-6 years, there wasn't a one-stop shop, so I had to travel to train different martial arts in different places. So sometimes I'd drive for an hour, then I would do 2 to 3 hours training, and then drive home for an hour. And I'd done that almost every night for the best part of 10 years.
Sports, like honestly, that's kind of like the ethos of Sports for Champions. One of like the main goals and aspirations we have is to kind of showcase to kind of like schools, parents, that athletes who do it because they're so passionate about their sport have to sacrifice so much in terms of traveling, in terms of their training, their nutrition. Kind of, you give up a lot of time that like your average person might be watching TV or spending it with like family, and you have to be able to like separate yourself from.
And it can only be love
things.
that would ever drive you then, because there was no money in this sport at the time.
Exactly.
So you were just investing in yourself. You were literally just okay, I want these skills, I want this knowledge. But I was just so grateful, because the people that I was learning from, they had to go through even worse to learn what was in their heads. So the guys, one of the guys I learned Muay Thai from early on, guy John Craig, he used to travel to Manchester to the Master Sken Academy, and he would go down for weekends, and that's how he would learn. Because there wasn't any Muay Thai in Scotland, there was nobody that could teach it.
So you'd kind of like filter between different coaches, different venues.
Yeah, you'd be fortunate enough to learn from all these different people who had dedicated their lives to martial arts.
Did you ever feel kind of like when you like wanted to train a new discipline that you were like a novice and a beginner all again going back to like ego?
Always.
Did you ever feel like embarrassed when you're like, I'm really good at this thing, but then I go to this new place and I'm like, oh, I have no experience of this facet of the sport?
That's what I think. I'm really, really lucky. I started all martial arts at the same time, so I've always been able to put myself as a beginner and be impartial as well. Like, so when I look at a martial art, I don't ever look at it through biased eyes. That's one of the biggest roadblocks for most martial artists that I've ever met, is that they believe that the martial art that they started with is always number one, and they because there's always a little culture with every martial art where they're like, yeah, those guys are like, those guys aren't good at this, or those guys aren't good at that, and they'll all to make themselves feel superior in their martial art, when really you just need to look at, there are definitely martial arts that are more effective than others. But
it's funny that you get that in all walks of life. I play a lot of video games. I know it's not essentially, but you've got esports, and like in esports there's always what they call a meta, and the meta is basically like, say you're in a shooter game, there's always a weapon, or there's always like an angle that people hold that is like the meta, or there's always like select characters you choose, and that's the meta team that you go with. And I'd imagine you're always going to get people that have a meta within MMA and think this is better than that.
You do tend to find that it's just
until someone comes along and changes that meta.
It's just usually through lack of experience, just like anything else, through maybe lack of understanding of that martial art. But you do see it all the time, and I kind of mentioned earlier on that I thought judo was one of those that was almost dismissed and looked over, but I see them all impartially, and I see the good bits of them, I see the bad bits of them, even parts of the culture. You see, because they've all got different cultures. That's the crazy thing, because MMA has its own culture, but Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has its own culture, judo has its own culture, wrestling has its own culture.
In terms of culture, how would you define?
So for example,
obviously you have to break down everyone, but just generally
the sort of common I would say like the common traits of the people the practitioners. So they all tend to have quite similar viewpoints, style of communication, everything. The people that are attracted to them.
The way it's coached.
The way it's coached is massive. Absolutely, the way it's coached is actually, that's one of the things that I must say with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's just. The coaching in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is really, really high level. It's very. They break it down to the very.
So it's literally almost become textbook at this point, where not where they're reading textbooks to teach, but they've internalised so much knowledge that they can break down every single analytic.
It's literally to the most minuscule details in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and that's coaches from all over the world that are just phenomenal. With Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I think you're dealing with some of the most logical thinkers you'll ever come across in your life. Obviously, with the striking arts, like there's some incredible striking coaches as well.
To be an MMA fighter, do you have to be intelligent? Then do you think they go hand in hand? Do you think there's any correlation between the two?
Yes, like there's absolutely no way. It depends how you define intelligence as well, because there's different types of intelligence. Obviously, there's people that are book smart, and there's social skills. There's a lot of different types of intelligence that you get.
And I suppose that's where people like sports psychologists come into the game, where maybe they're the book smart people. Maybe somebody isn't book smart themselves, but they would like to incorporate that into their game. So I think it segues into a really good way to close this, I feel. So I had a question I prepared in advance, but I think it ties in pretty well with that. So the question is, what makes someone a hero? Because we have a preconception of what a superhero is, that they have to be this almighty powerful person, but in your eyes, what makes somebody a hero to you personally?
I think it's making a massive change, in somebody's life, being able to change somebody's life for the better. That's what a hero is. It could be in a moment, it could be in something that happens over time, it could be just one thing that somebody says that that resonates with somebody, or saying it in a certain way. But being able to positively change somebody's life and sometimes even steer it in a different direction. It could be that somebody's life steering in that direction, you're able to just steer it in that direction. And if you can do that for one person, that person could then maybe go and do it for other people, and it pays it forward. And I always talk about that with my students and with everybody else. It's I've been really fortunate that a lot of people done things for me just purely out of the kindness of their heart to see me progress in my life and throughout my martial arts career, and it's great to be able to pay that forward. And if everybody tried to do that, and just positively affect those around them, I think the world would be a better place in general.
That's a brilliant answer. For me personally, I've always thought of the small moments. I always think to be a hero, you look at parents, or you look at somebody that does something small for you, and those things build up. It's like a catalyst for change, and over time, that might have a massive positive impact on your life. So like you say, it's not necessarily about someone having this limelight. It's about little instrumental things that change who you are as a person and give you that confidence.
Just even believing in you, sometimes people just don't believe in it. That's honestly, unfortunately for me, one of the sad parts of martial arts is that you're constantly around people who have massive potential that just unfortunately sometimes don't see it in themselves. And even if you tell them, they'll still not see it in themselves. It's about something about the way you tell them or being able to show them. So for all the great that you see, you also see the sadness of people not believing in themselves. But that's where every now and again you get to turn that around for somebody, and they'll actually fulfil their potential, and that's where it's so rewarding that you get to see that and see somebody make the most of themselves and what they're capable of doing.
Thank you very much. I think that summarises basically everything we've talked about really nicely, and I don't want to take up any more of your time, so thank you so much for being here.
For probably a few hours.
Appreciate it very much. Yeah. So we'll keep going next up. Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Cheers. Thank you so much, dude. Appreciate it.